never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team. I would be very careful about slinging stuff. Am I going to get sued? We go legal on this?
I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Friday, Sam Monson back with Mike Renner. Mike, things are looking up already. I just got an email to tell me that I'm pre-approved for a very impressive credit card, apparently. So Friday couldn't be going any better over here. How about you?
Make a play on that. Get you some nice perks there. Maybe some lounge access.
Yeah, I don't know how real it is and how much this is just spam, but these are the risks we run in today's life. Cool show today, though.
Draft season already off to a good start.
Yeah, cool show today, though. We're going to be talking risers and fallers in the whole pre-draft process. You just put out an update to the PFF big board that you've been working hard on. We'll be talking about guys that have helped themselves during the pro day circuit that's been going on at the moment. And then everybody's favorite, player comps. Meaningless though they may be, and forced though they often are, we will be talking some player comps that we like at the end of the show as well. So I think a good show today.
Well, we're talking the ones that actually are good, right?
Yes.
They're forced because people throw them out like candy. Every third rounder gets comped to an all-pro at their position because they had one highlight that looked like a guy.
Well,
so we're talking the ones that actually look realistic.
Right. Like, I don't envy your position because you do the draft guide, the all the work in that, which has a sort of player comp element to it. So you essentially have to find a comp for pretty much everybody. Whereas to me, I find that very hard. Like, not every player reminds you of somebody. To me, the comps that I get are only the ones where you're watching through a tape and immediately, for some reason, you're reminded of a player, whether it's the way they move, which it usually is, to be honest, to me. Like, that's the thing that tends to catch my eye as, oh, that guy moves or does something the same kind of way as a player that I remember from whatever. So I tend to get a few of them over the course of the draft season that just pop up. How does your player comp process work?
Usually I try to make it physically based, like what they can do from that perspective, whether it's size, speed, wingspan, that sort of thing. I try not, so that at times you'll get, and as we'll see even in the ones, you'll get guys comped to bad players sometimes, or busts at their respective position. It doesn't mean I'm calling them a bust. It just means that was the closest thing physically. Sometimes guys bust not because of how they are put together as an athlete, because of how they maybe play the game of football. So I try to focus on that part of the position, or of whatever position it is that I'm trying to make comps for, because try to get stylistic comps and just how they play the game of football is really a lot of eye of the beholder stuff. To me, that's how you end up getting a lot of the weird high-end comps, because guys will just look better on college football fields, right? Yeah. And so you're seeing their style and how they perform at college, and you're like, oh, he's, the next Jadeveon Clowney. When it's well, Jadeveon Clowney, did you see him on a college football field? The guy looked like an absolute alien. And then he gets to the NFL, and it's everyone else is an alien. You don't stand out as much.
Yeah, I think some kind of combination of play style, how they play the game, physical traits, some kind of mesh of that is what makes sense to me from a comp point of view. I don't understand anybody that is pulling out player comps for this is where this guy is going to be level-wise at the NFL. I mean, theoretically, that's what you're trying to do with, a big board or just draft projections or anything else you're doing. Mm-hmm. Analyzing the guy's tape, there's no real reason to put a name on it at the end of it, right? This guy's the next Larry Fitzgerald. Well, if you're putting him number 1 overall in the draft as a wide receiver, you're probably already covering that, right? We don't need to pull out Larry Fitzgerald's name to make the point. You're already articulating this guy as the next superstar wide receiver. So it has to be some kind of style, size, shape, some kind of thing that just gives you a little mental picture of what this player is, even if you've never watched a down of his tape. So we'll get into that.
And I will say, comps are a great way to it's a great litmus test to see who knows what the hell they're talking about. Because if you see someone throwing out some pretty rough comps, I am immediately going to not respect a lot of your opinions about the game of football. Unfortunately,
there's definitely there are times where you see a guy throw out half a dozen at the same time and they're almost all terrible. That's obviously a huge red flag. But I do think it's interesting when you get a certain player. Like it almost sort of highlights sometimes how far people are away on certain guys. Like at the combine, we were sitting there with the late Austin Gale, formerly of PFF, now with the Ringer. And Austin, and I forget who else was at the table, but a couple of guys had a couple of comps for Zay Flowers that I thought were crazy based off the tape. Like I just didn't think stylistically they matched what I saw at all. So I think sometimes the players, the people.
Who were they? Let's name some names. Let's get them. We don't have to name who said them. We could just name what they said.
I forget who his comp was, but it was somebody crazy that I just didn't see at all. It was some kind of like designated deep threat guy that didn't strike me as a Zay Flowers type of player at all. I forget who it was. Let me text him now and see if he'll give us the answer.
I put T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton was my comp for Zay Flowers.
Okay, so from hearing other people talk, the outlier is me, which makes sense given I'm lower on Zay Flowers in my rankings and pretty much everybody else as well. But that I think is interesting, right? The fact that multiple people can watch the same guy and come away with even very different stylistic comps for who he actually is.
Mm-hmm. Who is your comp for Zay?
So he reminded me a lot of wide receiver Dante Hall. Right? Like, remember when they tried to make Dante Hall into a slot receiver?
Yeah.
And just because, hey, we've got this, greatest punt returner in NFL history. Surely there's a way of using that on offense. Let's make him into a slot receiver. And because it was, the early 2000s, there wasn't, nobody really knew what to do with that. And it didn't work that well. He had 2,000 career yards or something. But, if you imagine that adjusted for inflation and, in an offense that actually knows what to do with it, that's who he reminded me of.
As a kid, I swore up and down, I'm like, him, Zahir Hakeem, I'm like, these guys are going to be awesome receivers. Just because I saw them return punts, I'm like, oh, that's all it takes to be a good receiver in the NFL. They got it. Unfortunately, those never came to fruition.
Well, it's one of the greatest what ifs has always been, who's the small receiver that the Bengals drafted that never became the guy that he was supposed to be, a slot receiver. One of the
Patrick Warwick, Peter Warwick.
Yeah, Peter Warwick coming out today strikes me as a guy who would be dynamic. They just didn't know what to do with that when Peter Warwick came into the NFL. It wasn't. It's like when you try to make Michael Vick run the West Coast offense. You just didn't know what to do with a player that's that unusual but incredibly talented. I feel like today all of those guys have a better chance because the league is just so much better equipped to put them in an unusual role and make it work.
The ultimate guy in that mold, in my opinion, going back and watching some tape now as an adult, is Santana Moss. Santana Moss, you go back and watch his Miami tape or even with Washington, he was just electric. Yeah. He just was not utilized in the game the way it was played back then, the way he would be today. He physically looks like what Jalen Waddle looks like on an NFL field. Right?
Yeah, he was so good. No, I think you're right. He would have been even better today. So we'll get into those player comps late in the show. First up, though, before we get into everything, the PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. That's westernsouthern.com/PFF. All right, Mike, let's start with our risers and fallers on the latest edition of the PFF Big Board. How many players are we up to now?
We have 150 on the latest one.
Okay.
200 in the PFF draft guide. I think the final board will drop in a week and a half, and it will be I think 250. Maybe we can sneak it out to 300. I'll have watched that many by then. Not that I'll really care, but I still want to have an AJ Dillon situation on our hands again this year. Like no one would stop talking about the fact that AJ Dillon was not in the 250. And I think I've proven to be closer to his actual impact on an NFL field than the Packers were. Let's just say.
All right. So we had some names that got thrown up in terms of big jumps, big drops as well. Who do you want to start with?
Let's start with Darnell Wright.
Yeah.
The Tennessee offensive tackle, because I think he underscores just like a little peek behind just like how I evaluate offensive tackles. I initially just movement skills wise was worried a little bit about him staying a tackle. And so like the big reason why his jump is like if you tell me a guy's not going to be a tackle at the next level, immediately like that's like a 20 position jump just in terms of value that you're working with. And so that's why he's that's a factor in him being a biggest riser. So he was one of the guys who at the Senior Bowl, I was probably the one thing that really stuck in my mind when I did the kind of final eval on him, when I was just like, it was a lackluster performance. It was not a lights out. I did have worries about him playing on an island, but then really the testing at the combine was something that made me go back and watch the tape. And like, that's, as a draft analyst, I'm not too proud to admit when my initial sort of opinion of a player is probably wrong. And he tested out way better than I ever expected. Tested to the level where that is an offensive tackle at the next level. So I go back and watch, his tape at Tennessee and go back and watch some previous years too, just to get a hand on who he was. And I thought his previous years were legitimately bad. Like he made a legitimate massive leap to this season. Yeah. But the kind of foot speed and quickness, I did not value it enough. I did not give it credence enough. The explosiveness with which he can change directions is much, much better than I initially gave him credit for. And then at that point, I just see him slotting into a scheme that is like a duo gap heavy scheme and really won't be, putting him on a ton of islands, protecting him with tight ends. And then once that's the case, like he is the best tackle in this class once he gets his hands on you, in my opinion. He is the most powerful offensive tackle. And if you can just protect him a little bit in that regard and not have to put him, completely on his own the way you would maybe say a Lane Johnson, I think he can be a damn good tackle at the next level. And now he's moved up all the way to OT3 for him.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that people recognize that sometimes you're going to go through and on your first viewing of a guy, you're going to get it wrong. Whether it's, you've watched a ton of guys already that day and you're just like your brain is switched off at that stage, or whether you just missed some stuff, like whatever it is. I'm way more concerned by people that just go through once, watch their thing, and then like, this is my board, and it's basically not going to move between now and the draft. We were talking about it when we did our wide receiver rankings. Both myself and Steve kind of whiffed and missed on Charlie Jones. And then from watching corners, I actually ended up seeing him pop a bunch and go, wow. I mean, a couple of guys in the comments or whatever raised him as a potential sleeper that we didn't talk about. But then when we went through and did our cornerback rankings, he kept jumping off the tape from watching people's corner film. And you're like, man, I did miss on this guy. You go back and watch him, you're like, yeah, he's way better than I thought he was. And he should have been on, like we only went to 10 on the rankings. It probably wouldn't put him in the 10, but I went to 15 in the comments when somebody asked, and I think he'd be in my top 15 now.
Yeah, Charlie Jones, awesome as a slot receiver. I think he will be maybe not Hunter Renfrow, maybe not that level of craftiness, but he's going to be reliable as can be. I mean, he has some of the best hands in this draft class, and is a good sudden route runner too. But to go back to kind of your point about on first watch not being too proud to change your opinion, if anyone's studied behavioral science at all, and which I'm very interested in. It's something that's like a passion of mine outside of obviously football, because it's important in kind of the scouting business is how you perceive the world and how you're perceiving these guys. There are so many factors that can change your opinion of what you're seeing in front of you that are really, I don't want to say outside of your control, but that you don't take into account on first watch or like when you're in the moment, that the next time you watch, and that's like been proven with like judges and their sentencing, and that they are lighter with their sentencing after lunch prior as opposed to before lunch, and how like those things that you don't even think about it, but the mood and how you approach in that moment can change how your actions are. So that to me is something that I don't want. I don't. There's pretty much zero prospects in this class that I will run through once. Zero top prospects that I'll run through once and be done.
Yeah.
I like to have a couple of viewings of their tape at some point in time, just because of that fact that the first view may be impacted by things that are completely erroneous in nature.
Right. I also like there's a plenty of times where, you go through, you'll have your rankings, and there are guys that I am higher or lower on than everybody else, right? And there are sometimes, like, my immediate reaction when that happens is, okay, if I'm the outlier, I need to go and check again at some point and make sure that I'm not crazy, right? But, and sometimes it'll go either way. Sometimes you go, no, I might be on my own in this island, but I'm comfortable here. Like, I think I'm right on this one. That's where I am with Zay Flowers. Like, I'm really on an island not loving Zay Flowers relative to everybody else. A lot of people that I respect, a lot of people I think are really smart when it comes to this stuff. I've watched him multiple times, and I'm still comfortable being lower on him than everybody else. There are other times where you go back and you watch it and you go, no, I was off. Like, whatever reason, didn't like the guy, loved the guy too much. Everybody else told me I was nuts. I went back and looked at it again. And whatever happened the first time around, like, I focused on the wrong things, or I focused too much on whatever, I got it wrong. And your story there about the judges was interesting, because I had a theory for a long time that PFF founder Neil Hornsby used to have a volatile mood swing. The baseline was never flat the whole way. It was up or down. My theory was that it was almost 100% driven by blood sugar levels. And if you just threw him a protein bar when he was in a bad mood, give it half an hour, you'd get yourself back onto the good side.
That really is so accurate. And it is though. Like, people are human. You are, you're human. Like, those things impact you and you don't even realize it, because you're not kind of in control of it. Your body is doing it outside of your actual mental capacity. So, yeah, I agree with you there. And the whole wisdom of the crowds thing with your Zay Flowers, if you stray a lot from the public consensus, or just from what everyone else is at a position, you should reevaluate. And it doesn't mean you should fall in line.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. It should just mean you shouldn't be defiantly confident that you know something that everyone else doesn't know. Right? You should have some respect for the wisdom of the crowds and how that's proven to be, more accurate a lot of times than quote unquote experts.
And it's not even just wisdom of the crowds. It's every data point is just like a check, right? Like the basic starting point, the sort of the baseline of everything you're doing is go watch the tape, come up with your opinion, and sort of define it in some way, shape, or form. And then every other element of data in the entire draft process is providing you either a check or a confirmation on whatever it is you thought the first time. So if you're not using that data, if something comes along and it's different to what you thought it was from the tape, if your initial reaction every step of the way is to go, oh, that data point's wrong, or it's meaningless in this scenario because whatever, every single time it should be sending you back to check that you didn't just get it wrong the first time around for whatever reason, whether it's the speed numbers being different, the testing, other people saying you're crazy. Every scenario should be all right, let's at least, make sure. And I would say, certainly when it's, multiple people, I wouldn't say any random guy being well, you're crazy because my rankings are different. Maybe that's, but when you know that you're the outlier on a guy, you should definitely not be just going, well, my first run said this, so I'm comfortable with it.
Yes, 100%.
One other element to Darnell Wright is he had some pretty good tape against some good competition this year.
Yes.
Obviously in that conference, you're going to face some really good high-end players. I think he looked really good against Will Anderson, Alabama, which is obviously a big thing. He's got some very good tapes this year.
Yeah, I have to agree there that was there's now the consistency is still an aspect that I worry about with him. And after 4 years at Tennessee, he doesn't have the same kind of excuses that, say, Broderick Jones and Paris Campbell may have for consistency, but he is physically a special dude in what he brings to the table. He has those things that make up elite tackles. That is just, it's really just cleaning up that consistency. That's kind of the holding him between being, a Pro Bowl caliber tackle at the next level.
We just did our cornerback rankings on yesterday's show. I'm already losing track of the days. And one guy that I was surprised by was Riley Moss, the Iowa corner. I just want you to tell me what you've seen on Riley Moss's tape, because you go in there and you're like, white guy wearing number 33, no, we're immediately out. It's not going to happen. Sorry. It's tough, but it's just the way of the world. But you put on his tape, and that dude can play. Like, he's not bad.
Yeah, Riley Moss is very athletic. And I mean, obviously, that's to be a white guy to even get a shot at corner. That's kind of a prerequisite, right?
Right.
But that's the thing that really jumps out, is that you see elite change of direction ability, kind of elite short area burst and quicks that I think there's a spot for him at corner in the NFL. Everyone wants to move him to safety for obvious reasons. But I think truly as a corner, he's just a zone corner. He's tight frame dude, 30-inch arms, but you really do see and plays, and that's what he played at Iowa too. Like, they are an off-zone team. He's backing out into deep thirds, deep quarters a lot, and not really doing things that necessarily you value at the NFL level. But when he was asked to do those, I think he has very well-rounded skill set for a zone corner, and that he can tackle, that he wants to tackle, and that he has quickness to go and close to ball carriers.
It is wild what an outlier that is. Like, Jason Sehorn is 50-something years old. He retired in 2003. We're talking 20 years in the NFL without a white cornerback playing. That's just such a wild thing. I
thought Reed Blankenship, the safety for the Eagles right now, I thought he had a shot to be the next one. I thought if someone wanted to move him to corner, it wouldn't be ridiculous. And I think you're seeing him, he played well last year when he got the opportunity for the Eagles. So he was a guy that I thought might have been the next one. Riley Moss, though, stick him at corner. Don't move him to safety.
Yeah, seriously. I think he showed more than enough on his tape. And he went up against, the gauntlet of receivers he faced was not exactly the toughest thing in the world, but he did face a couple of good guys and performed well against them. And I do think that he might actually be potentially better than he showed last year as well, because he got really, I think, unlucky at the catch point a bunch of times. I don't think it was a sort of inherent flaw in the way he plays. I think he just timed his sort of transition to look for the football badly a couple of times, and a few of them got through. But if that doesn't happen, the next time around, he's immediately improving a little bit. So I like his potential. You've got a couple of wide receivers that were on the move in this latest adjustment of the big board. Talk to me about Jonathan Mingo, because that was a guy who I loved watching the tape. And I think I put him at number 8, I think, in my wide receiver rankings. And I'm almost reaching the point where I'm sad I didn't push him even higher. I love that dude's tape.
Yeah, and his combine was awesome. 4.46 at 220 pounds. The production's still weird. He's been starting actually for Ole Miss since his true freshman year, and he's a senior now, and never went over 400 yards until his senior year, and even then only didn't even go for over 900 this past season. So weird production in an offense that's kind of pumped up guys production standpoint. Like Elijah Moore went off in that offense. They've had guys over the years, obviously in Lane Kiffin's offense, that just it features wide receivers usually. So it's a weird, why didn't he produce more? Then you watch the tape and you're just that's, the quarterback's fault, right? It really wasn't on Mingo that was the case.
That's the thing. That's what I found is you go into his tape and you're expecting to kind of see all these kind of reasons why maybe he never became that guy. And I struggle to find things that he wasn't good at. There really isn't any good reason why he doesn't seem to have had a much better college career than he actually had.
Yeah, and I will say the one knock, he runs a little sloppy. His hitch routes are a 4 or 5 yard comeback on those. That's the one thing that I'm a little worried about him becoming a real complete wide receiver at the next level. But to me, he's kind of a real nice number 3 in an offense if I were putting together an NFL receiving core.
He feels like a classic example of a receiver that I think has a good shot to be a better NFL receiver than he was in college. Like a guy that for whatever reason, I don't know, it just didn't seem to happen for him at the college level. I don't have a good explanation for that particularly, but you look at the tape, you look at the athleticism measurables, you look at what he did at the Senior Bowl, and you're like, I'm not seeing problems here. Like I don't see any reason that this guy can't come in and be immediately a pretty good wide receiver at the next level. I just feel like he's a guy that, and all of a sudden I think you're starting to hear some buzz around him. Like generally his stock appears to be going up in addition to the move on the big board. Like I think everyone is kind of coming to that conclusion that this guy's good.
Yeah. All right, next one. I like, let's do Corey Trice. I want to talk about Corey Trice a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he moved up, having added him to the most recent edition of the draft guide. He is 6'3", 205, and like 32 and 3/8 inch arms. He is a monster at the line of scrimmage. And watching him on tape, I had questions about his change of direction ability. And like, could he actually, because he really, outside of his work in press, there wasn't a lot to write home about. But then the pre-draft process, he goes 6.7 in the 3-cone and 4.06 in the short shuttle, which are high-end numbers for a cornerback, for like a 185-pound quarterback. And he's 6'3", 205. I was floored when I saw those. And that to me is that was like the biggest question mark for a guy. And then he puts up high numbers in that regard. I'm like, I think he's one of the most slept on players in this class. Now he's coming off a torn ACL, which may have been kind of, it's been like 4 months since his tape to his pro day, right? Like that's 4 months of recovery post ACL that he could legitimately be a different dude now at this point in terms of change of direction ability. So he's one that I would 100% buy into. Not every scheme. You really have to be still a press heavy scheme. If you're a press heavy scheme, this guy is a top 75 player on your board. He truly should be. If you're looking at the cornerback position. Yeah,
there were a lot of people that brought his name up when we did our cornerback rankings yesterday as somebody that needs to be talked about, somebody that definitely should be a sleeper in one of the lists. So, yeah, good to see his name on there. Who else do you want to bring up?
Let's talk about a faller in the pre-draft process. Let's talk about Andre Carter, flip side of the ball, the Army edge rusher. Just because at his pro day, he didn't run the 40th combine. He just did the vertical and the broad jump, and they were bad. 30-inch vertical, 9.1 broad jump. Those are awful, disastrous numbers for an edge rusher. And then he goes to his pro day, and he runs a 4.9 340 at 256 pounds. And at the Senior Bowl, like the musculature sticks out like a sore thumb. This guy looks like a high school prospect, truthfully, from a pure build aspect. Like look at his arms there in that picture. I have more definition than that guy, sadly. He just really is not put together like an NFL edge rusher yet. So he went from, just to me, the timeline then, and I still love the skill set. I still think, because he did run a 6'9", 7'3" cone as pro day. It's like that's an elite 3-cone for a guy that frame. That is a unique ability at that size to be able to turn the corner the way he does. And his 4.29 short shuttle was a great time too for a guy that size. Those are both like high end, and I think that's how he wins. But you saw the 11 bench press reps there too. He's just too far away right now from seeing an NFL field. I always thought he was going to be a project, but I thought he was kind of like in the Max Crosby mold of Max Crosby came out of Eastern Michigan, very skinny.
Yeah.
And then, but was still making an impact year one, and by year two, he was a dude. I thought that could have been Andre Carter. I think he's probably 3 years away from really being physically put together the way an NFL edge rusher is. 3 years of like actually being able to train year round, actual nutrition. And obviously going to Army, like I trust that the dude has the discipline to get it done and knows, how to train and get there. But I do just think the value proposition of this guy can't see the field for me year one and year two, we're still talking about a rotational player. That's hard. That's hard to sell me on in the top, 75 picks.
That's the thing. It's like you can be reasonably confident in what he can be, but you're basically talking at this stage about like a total red shirt, year, right? Like we need to spend the first year is not even football. The first year is like putting him in a weight room for 12 months and figuring out how many pounds we add to his frame, right? Like, are we talking about a 275-pound guy once we've packed on the nutrition, the workout regimen, like figure out where we can get him to physically? And then year 2 is figuring out like what he is as a football player. And then you get to the point at the end of it of like what he can actually be. So yeah, it ends up being like, what is the value of this kind of multi-year project? And forget sort of where you take that in the draft, but like, are you even willing to spend the roster spot on just like that time, that space? Like that, like when you start laying that out as a plan, you're almost talking about like a practice squad player, which obviously you don't take practice squad players high in the draft because, you know, those things they're not connected. They're not conducive. They're not a happy marriage.
Yeah. I do think he makes a lot of sense though for teams with with year 3 being kind of their window, or like the teams in a rebuild, in a roster reset, whether it's like the Rams, the Cardinals, teams like that. I would love for them to draft him because they can afford that, right? They can afford to take guys like that. They don't need to win next year, truthfully.
Talk to me about Cedric Tillman, who for a long time was the other Tennessee wide receiver, right? Jalen Hyatt, the speedster, the guy that everybody thought was going to run crazy time and push himself up into the first round maybe. And then the longer things have gone on, I think the more you're seeing people put Cedric Tillman above Jalen Hyatt from that offense. I saw him showing up in the first round in a couple of mock drafts, but generally his stock appears to be going up, and that's the direction you have it going on the big board as well.
First round's crazy to me, but he's a very safe possession receiver. And I, on tape, thought he was maybe more of like a 4.6 guy. And truthfully, what made me bump him up was, won the combine. He goes 4.54, which good time frame with 37-inch vertical and 10.8 broad jump, which are, boom, great numbers, especially for a bigger wide receiver. 213. That's an athlete that can be just a little bit more than a possession wide receiver. I don't think he's ever going to be, high end. Like he's not DeAndre Hopkins in your possession wide receiver mold, where he's like D-Hop's a possession receiver, but then also is so elite at the catch point that he can create big plays down the football field. Because of that, I don't quite see that with Tillman, but I do think that he's a high-end possession receiver. And going back and watching previous years, I think being injured this year, I believe it was an ankle injury. Prior seasons, I thought 2021, his tape was just a little better and probably sold me on him as, one of the 10 best receivers in this class.
And we spent a lot of time on this show, and you and I have talked about it a bit as well. The general sort of feel has been negative on the Tennessee prospects from that offense because of that offense, right? And it's not that you don't think that they're good, it's that the projection involved from that offense to what they're going to be doing in the NFL is so huge. But I do think of the three, of Hendon Hooker, the quarterback, of Jalen Hyatt, the wide receiver, and then Cedric Tillman, the other wide receiver, Tillman's role was closest to what he's going to have to do at the NFL level. Like he did his route tree, his alignment, his having to deal with guys at the line of scrimmage, like he did more NFL things than Jalen Hyatt did, in case people are sort of like, well, why are you hammering Hyatt for that offense and not Tillman?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, is that it's still not quite, what you would ideally want to see, but it was much closer to what we saw Quentin Johnston do, in that he's stuck on one side as your outside guy, or he's just stuck as the outside guy. That's how, in that, facing that offense, defenses like to press the outside guy. So he played last season half as many snaps as a receiver as Jalen Hyatt because he was hurt. Faced 3 times as many snaps against press and half as many snaps. 136 snaps against press versus only 40 for Jalen Hyatt. So that is like the big difference, is that when he produced, when he won, it was how you're having to win at the NFL level, even if it was like a limited route tree. Whereas Jalen Hyatt, so few of those reps even exist versus NFL defenses.
One more wide receiver that slipped this time, Josh Downs. So one of the 3, I guess, early-ish first, second round guys that are really, really small speedsters. You had him falling down the draft board. Why is that?
Yeah, I just worry. Going back and watching his tape, I love the creativity that he runs routes with. But then I think in that North Carolina offense, I think he had some Stevie Johnson to him in that he just could run where he wanted to run, which was kind of like, that's always the hard thing to eval. And now he's a great athlete, don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be a very good slot receiver at the next level for sure. But I think a lot of his production came because he just was basically freestyling out there. And that's just something that you can't do quite as much of at the NFL level. So I do love him, do still really like him as a prospect, but I think I got a little oversold on the pure route running ability in that. I think he was just kind of given carte blanche to create some space and go find it.
I also think he's a fascinating example of, like, I think everybody's kind of aligned on what he is. Like, everybody describes him the same, talks about him in the same way, likes him the same way, and it's a case of what is that value? Like, what is that worth? And it's like a sort of lesser version of the running back conversation. Like, we're confident in what this guy is. Where do you take that versus, you know, the edge rushers of the world, the offensive linemen of the world? Like, just where does he slot in on the board, I think, is his biggest challenge, because everyone's set on what he actually is. Last name we need to bring up, Cody Mock, the offensive lineman from North Dakota State, right?
Yes, NDSU. And now I still do think he is a project, but this guy is a much better athlete than I even gave him credit for. I think he ran 7.13 3-cone at his pro day, had a 10 split in this 1.7 range at over 300 pounds. And now I still think he needs to get bigger. I still think he needs to improve in pass protection. But boy, when a guy moves to that degree, is he just, I don't want to say a sure thing in the run game, but certain schemes that just play guys on the move with their interior offensive linemen, he's going to find he's going to find linebackers, he's going to find DBs out in space better than any other offensive lineman in this class. And just at that point, that's such a valuable skill set for a 300-plus pounder that I don't think the pass pro concerns are enough to have me drop him down boards, and just like to have me worried about the impact he can make at the next level.
Okay, we talked about Andre Carter already. Who are some more guys that move themselves dramatically one direction or the other based off their pro day performances?
Yeah, there were a couple safeties who really did not show up at their pro days. I don't know. There were a number of guys that had really weird pro days that kind of just flew under the radar, got underreported. But Jordan Battle, the safety from Alabama, kind of like another guy who everyone has the same opinion on. Everyone's like, he's not a high-end safety, but he's going to be a long-term NFL starter. He had a 29.5-inch vertical and a 9.6 broad jump and a 7.3 1.3 cone for a safety. Those are like, that's a position where those are the drills that, I don't need, especially in today's NFL where you're playing a lot of quarters, you're not really covering a ton of you don't need pure range the way maybe you did when there was single high was the wave. You need the change of direction ability. You need to turn. You need to get to somewhere that's like outside of your immediate frame of reference quickly. And those are not numbers that make me feel good about him doing so. So he had a really bad one. And then one of the guys I thought could have been one of the real single high guys in this draft class, Christopher Smith, already a red flag at the combine when he went 4.62 with a 33-inch vertical and a 9.8 broad jump. Again, all rough numbers. At his pro day, he had a 7.45 3-cone. I don't want to make any more bets the way we did in the past, but I would bet money I can go out and run better than a 7.45 3-cone right now. That's a truly disastrous number for a player who's 192 pounds. So very, very worrisome there for the two safeties.
It's funny. I was thinking that if you're an NFL defensive back prospect and your vertical starts with a 2, that's catastrophic. Yeah. Like, I genuinely think I have a pretty good shot at getting the first number being a 3 right now. Like, I don't have the best vertical in the world, and I still think I could get a 3. Maybe, again, like this is like the baseball thing, right? Maybe 3-0, but I still think I could get to 3. I think I've got that kind of hop still.
In your prime, I'd give it to you. Jumping is one thing where you lose it quick.
No,
if you're not jumping on the regular,
I got no kind of
it
vertical
goes fast.
I will say, so my daughter got one of those like kids sort of obstacle course things, like the plastic sticks and hurdles and cones and all this kind of crap, like in a box. And they have like a hurdle part where you set up the two things in a cone, you set the high bar and keep going up and up. Mm-hmm. I got the high bar pretty quick. Now I had a run up, but I was setting it like it was getting chest height and I was still clearing it, which I thought was reasonably impressive, particularly given that it was through a doorway and the chances of me braining myself on the ceiling, taking it down and smashing my face on the floor was reasonably high. I was quite impressed how high a bar I managed to clear still.
You're bragging about jumping over a child's toy?
Oh, yeah. That's
is that what I'm hearing?
That's the level of athletic achievement.
A kid's jumping thing that you jumped over. No, I trust that you still got a little left in the tank. I believe in you. I'd like to see your vert here.
That's the level of athletic achievement we've reached at this point in life. Is that the sports have dried up, like the competition is gone. So you've got to make the competition where you can find it. And at the combine, it was running a 40.
With your child.
Yeah, exactly. And in the combine, it was running a 40 in sneakers and this kind of get up. And outside of that, it's the kid's got herself a high jump kit. Let's see how high we can push this thing.
He didn't even have the worst vertical, though, of a guy who I thought might get drafted at a skill position. Travis Dye, Southern California, USC running back, 27-inch vertical at his pro day. I love his tape, too. He has some of the best vision in this draft class. He runs the way you need to run at the NFL level. But he went 4.82 with 27-inch vertical at his pro day. And now he was coming off, I believe, an ankle injury. And maybe that's a big part of it. But just don't test if you're going to do that. After one drill, he should have that was either the 27-inch vertical or the 4.82 40. He should have just been like, that's what I ran, that's what I jumped, let's pack it in for the day. This isn't going to be my day.
27, that's so little. That's just over 2 feet. That's terrible.
That is. Well, there was the worst vertical, I believe, in combine history was Josu Matias. He was a former Florida State offensive lineman. I think he had a 19.5-inch vertical.
What was Orlando Brown's?
Orlando Brown's was awful, too.
19.5 inches for Orlando Brown.
It was 19 also?
Yeah, 19.5.
Oh, my God. But, that's for him. That might be just standing on his tiptoes, right? That's not leaving the earth. Okay, sorry. Josie Matias was 17.5 inches. I knew ridiculous. it was incredibly bad. 17.5 inches.
That's like that thing.
I don't think he's.
Well, that's like that story that elephants can't jump, right? They can't get off the ground because there's 8 tons of them or whatever. Elephants can't leave the surface of the planet, so. That's effectively what you're talking about here. This guy is so heavy that he can't propel his own weight more than 1.5 feet off the ground.
He's never felt his feet leave the earth.
When he runs, 1 foot is always
at the same
contact
time.
with the ground. Never actually leaves the surface of the planet. What about the other end of the scale? People that actually improved their stock during their pro days.
Yeah, Israel Abanikanda, the Pittsburgh running back. This was to be expected if you watched his tape, but he went 4.41 with a 41-inch vertical at 217 pounds. That is, speed score is a big thing for running backs because a lot of how the running back position's played at the next level, it's not, I think I've talked about this before, you don't get out in space with being able to shake guys a lot. A lot of how you break tackles is just purely running through an outstretched arm in the middle of a defense. And when a guy is that heavy, that explosive, that gives you a path to success at the NFL level. And now he's on tape, not the most physical of runners. I see Deuce Vaughn stick his nose into linebackers more than I see Abanikanda. But he's only 20 years old, really just learning the running back position and really just coming into his own this past season. That, there's a reason you buy into those kind of guys, definitely later in the draft, to see what you can coach into them, because you can't coach 4.41 and 41-inch vertical into guys who don't have it.
Yeah, there's the speed score stuff is important because, it's not going to help you run away from people any better, right? The speed is the same, but it's exactly what you talked about. It's going to help you get through contact because you're bringing whatever extra poundage to the table at the same speed. It's just physics. Like, you have a easier chance of running through that contact if you're bringing more weight to the table.
Yes. And so he definitely helped himself. I think another guy that helped himself in the pre-draft process and pre-draft process just the other day was Miles Murphy. He goes to his pro day, runs in the 4.5s at 268 pounds. He had a 3-cone and a short shuttle that were average to above average for the defensive end position. And he's 6'5", 268. Like, he is an explosive dude. Really, his testing almost mirrored the guy who I'm going to talk about later as comp is Rashawn Gary. Like, it was very similar just in terms of pure explosiveness, strength with 25 bench press reps that he put up. He is like that kind of edge rusher that you buy into him working just 1 to 2 moves at the next level. It's really all you need to teach that guy because he's so big, so explosive, and so powerful that, that's the tried and true body type that can win at the next level.
All right. Anybody else you want to shout out before we get into our player comps?
Let's give a shout out to Chandler Zavala, one of the hottest names in the draft sphere, the guard from NC State who had a back injury, ended his 2021 season early, was a D2 transfer from Fairmont State prior to that. 2 years at Fairmont State, gets hurt last year, comes in this past year, allows 4 pressures all season long. Awesome in pass protection, goes to his pro day and has one of the best pro days of anyone. This pre-draft process goes like 5 seconds in the 40, has one of the best 3-cone, 7.56 3-cone, 4.53 short shuttle leg. Those are high-end numbers for an interior offensive lineman, and he's 322 pounds. So this guy who's not played a lot of football at the highest of levels, but the football he has played has been very good. I think he's a top 3 probably interior line prospect now in this draft class after that. It's easy to buy into where his traits could take him.
And a good position to be moving upwards in right now because it's not the strongest, interior offensive line class that you're ever going to see. So there's a way for him to make a lot of money if teams buy into that. All right, let's start with our player comps. We're going to start with one guy that I think we brought up before because we both have him on our list and both come up with different players, but you can sort of see stylistically that we're in the same ballpark. Bijan Robinson, greatest running back prospect since whoever. We've each comped him to effectively a Hall of Famer. So who's the Hall of Famer that you think Bijan reminds you of?
I went with Edgerrin James. And now I went back and watched Edgerrin James tape. And James probably has a little more gear to him, a little more of a second gear, or doesn't have it now. But he went 4.38 coming out of Miami. But the rest is very similar in that they are elite change of direction dudes at 215, 216 pounds, that the way they run is just so smooth. The contact balance is all there, that there's so few weaknesses to their game. That's why obviously Edge was a Hall of Famer. I think that's a fair comp. I like yours as well, though, too.
Yeah, no, I think yours is good. Edge struck me as a little bit more kind of twitchy and sudden moving than Bijan and my guy. What the kind of the thing that ties him together with my comp, who was LaDainian Tomlinson, is those two guys just feel so incredible. Like, smoothness is the thing that connects them. Like, you watch those guys move and everything looks like it's one fluid movement. Even when there's like 4 or 5 cuts involved, it all feels like it's one pattern of movement, and they just kind of go from one smooth move to the next. And when you watch Tomlinson run, it's all like that. It's not these kind of sudden, twitchy adjustments in where he's moving. It's just one smooth glide to the next, one smooth cut, one smooth jump. That's, I think, where he really reminds me of Bijan.
Yeah, and again, don't usually advocate for comping to Hall of Famers, right. But when you are when you're that caliber prospect, when you're talking about the way Bijan is, that's when you can talk about Hall of Fame comps because those are the guys that, when you're blue chip prospect, you're not going to comp them to, your run of the mill starter in the NFL right now.
Okay, you've got one that I think is really interesting. Will Levis. Now, this is particularly interesting because you and I think, are both higher on Levis than most other people. And yet, who's your comp for him?
My comp for him is Jake Locker, the Washington QB, former Washington QB, former Titans QB. And I think there's maybe a little revisionist history on Locker and who he was, thought of as a draft bust. But that was because he literally just stopped caring about football, right? Like he retired after 4 years in the NFL because he didn't want to play anymore. And it's like well documented that he just gave up and was showing signs of life prior to that. But the arm, the size, Locker was 6'2", 230. The athleticism, Locker actually probably a little bit better, a little more of a high-end runner coming out. He ran a 4.58 with a 6'7", 7.3 cone. Like he was a freak at his size. Levis probably not that, but you're just that aspect of his game. Like he had that. It wasn't the focal point of his game. Both, tough dudes, both willing to take a hit. I think that's the comp that I keep going back to. That the biggest thing with Locker, the biggest thing with Levis is just their accuracy. It truly is. Like with Levis, if you tell me that he improves his accuracy by, a significant notch at the next level, I'm telling you that he's going to be a franchise quarterback. Like that is the thing standing in the way for him. So Locker never fixed it. Will Levis? I don't know.
It's not my comp, but I heard somebody comp Levis to Mitchell Trubisky, which I can see. Like
No, I don't see that at all.
Really?
I don't like that comp. Trubisky was a mental midget, still is. Pressure came. He was pooing his pants, peeing down his leg, doing both at the same time. Sometimes it just Trubisky and that's like the opposite. Like Trubisky, not a tough dude whatsoever. He would run out of bounds before he stuck his shoulder into a defensive back. And that was like his biggest downfall too. So that's like the reason I think from a pure tools perspective, possibly. But is the real separator to me between those two.
You're right. The toughness part doesn't mesh with Trubisky, but the inconsistency, for a guy that has that physical skill set, like why are you not making more big plays? That part I think meshes with Trubisky. Like there's some elements to it I think that I can definitely see the argument for. Who's the next guy on this list? So you already mentioned Myles Murphy being a Rashawn Gary comp. I think that's a pretty good one. Another edge rusher. I struggled to get a comp for him. Tyree Wilson.
I went with Jason Pierre-Paul. And now we didn't get pre-draft testing on Tyree Wilson, but his sort of selling points on tape aren't something that I think is going to get captured in pre-draft testing. And probably that's why, he wasn't going to go out and do it because it probably wasn't going to be elite. And Jason Pierre-Paul coming out wasn't either. And he's never been a guy who wins with pure athleticism. But if you'll recall, he was the guy doing backflips at 270 pounds, was just so fluid. And he ran a 4.78 with a 9.7 broad jump and 30.5-inch vertical. That was Jason Pierre-Paul. Nothing special athletically, but he had such a big wingspan, 34 3/4-inch arms, just played with such easy leverage and play strength, and then could finish plays so well. He gets off blocks and then gets to ball carriers with such ease. And that to me is Tyree Wilson. That he just can play off a block and make a play that he had no business getting to because his wingspan is so long, because he is so just fluid athletically that I think that gives you a high floor when you're projecting a guy like that to the next level.
Yeah, I really struggled to comp him because he has such this unusual body type that I was really struggling going back through the archives, through the database, trying to come up with edge rushers that just had anything like that as a body type. I couldn't really come up with a good one, certainly not one that played a similar kind of style. Let's talk with some wide receivers.
Yes.
My number one wide receiver in the draft is still Jordan Addison. JSN is your number one now, right?
Correct.
So who does JSN remind you of? And then I'll give you my Addison one.
This one is maybe one of the more accurate comps ever that I think I've ever done. And it's Julian Edelman. Purely from an on-field perspective, I just thought, both kind of slots who didn't necessarily have to play the slot, both super sudden route runners, very difficult to stick with for an entire route tree if they're, making multiple breaks and whatnot. But then the pre-draft testing hit, and it was probably the closest pre-draft testing I've ever seen between two prospects. The biggest difference is that JSN's 2 inches taller. He was 2 inches taller, 1 pound heavier. They ran the exact same 40 time, 4.52. They ran 1/100th of a second off in their short shuttle, 3.92 for Edelman, 3.93 for Jackson Smith. 3-cone was 0.5 off, or 500ths off, 6.62 for Edelman, 6.57 for Jack Smith and Jigba, 36.5-inch vert for Edelman versus 35-inch vert for Jack Smith, 10.3 broad for Edelman, 10.5 broad for JSN. Those are unbelievably close numbers. I truly have not seen two prospects come that close to each other ever.
Last year, I used Edelman for a comp last year for Sky Moore. That's who Sky Moore reminded me of a year ago. Mm-hmm. For the first thing you mentioned was a similar thing, like a guy that plays inside, doesn't necessarily have to play outside, wins with footwork, those kinds of things. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison reminds me a little bit of Isaac Bruce, where he's not physically imposing in any way, shape, or form. He's not fast. He's not big. He's not strong. But he's just good. He's a good wide receiver. And particularly later career Isaac Bruce, where he was sort of getting by, even more so on savvy, on just being in the right place at the right time, had this ridiculous run where he would just go, you know what, I'm 30 years old, I'm not even going to take a hit anymore. I'm just going to catch the ball and then drop like a sack of potatoes into this one spot and take the first down. I feel like all the deficiencies that people are sort of hammering Addison for, they're just not going to matter. I feel the way he wins, they're irrelevant.
So, fun fact about that comp, they are the exact same height and the exact same weight coming out.
Really?
Isaac Bruce was 5'11", 173 coming out. Ended up being a second-round pick. Jordan Addison, 5'11", 173.
I knew they were in the same ballpark.
And there's not a lot of 5'11", 173 wide receivers, so I know that. Because I was looking back, who was even in the realm of that size. Yeah. And Isaac Bruce is the only one who, at that size, was an NFL player.
I knew they were in the same ballpark. I didn't realize it was exact. But that to me is the kind of player that Addison is. Yeah. All right, cornerbacks. I had a couple of corner comps that I thought were pretty good. Trey Tomlinson.
Okay, hit me with them.
Anthony Tresh assures me that Travius Hodges Tomlinson now wants to be known as Trey Tomlinson. And given how much easier it is to say, I'm 100% on board with adopting that now. So Trey Tomlinson, TCU cornerback, reminded me a lot of Antoine Winfield, the original Antoine Winfield, not the safety, but a guy that was a prototypical slot, but actually played outside a lot as well. So Winfield did it in the NFL. I suspect Tomlinson gets kicked inside and just gets made into a slot corner, but could probably survive outside in a similar kind of way. Insanely feisty, just wants to fight people, get into a physical confrontation. And he does a lot of that Winfield stuff of contorting his way around blockers. Winfield was the best I've ever seen at that, to the point where half the stuff that Winfield used to do is now illegal. But Tomlinson does similar kinds of stuff in terms of just somehow getting around guys that are out in space, trying to block him away from those screens and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I like the play style comp. He still is, Winfield still has 2 inches on him, still has 20 pounds on him.
Right.
So, Trey Tomlinson is tiny. He will be, I believe, whenever he is drafted, he will be the highest drafted player, either corner or safety in the secondary, under 5'8" ever, I think. Or ever being modern NFL. Probably in 1955, there was probably a 5'6" dude who was drafted, whatever. But I'm talking modern NFL. The only comps you have for him in that realm, Tim Jennings, in that realm of size, who was 5'8", 185. Nickel Roby-Coleman, 5'7" and a quarter, but he was now obviously drafted when he came out. He was a UDFA. Lamarcus Joyner, 5'8", 180. That's if you're looking for guys who actually succeeded in the same size bracket, pretty much identical height, weight, that's really about it in the last 25 years.
Jennings is a great throwback. I'd forgotten that name entirely. So the other corner that I had
that was my comp for actually him in the draft guide.
Oh, nice. The other corner that I had a comp for was the other sort of high-end slot guy in this draft, Clark Phillips. Reminded me a lot of Chris Carr. And I don't know how many people even remember Chris Carr, old Raiders slot corner, Ravens, I think, as well. Maybe a couple of other places late in his career. But Chris Carr, I think there's a lot of similarities there. That
Cowboys,
kind of
right?
Prototypical. No, that was Brandon Carr, right? He didn't play.
Oh, okay. Wrong Carr. Then I don't remember Chris Carr. You're right.
So, like, prototypical slot corner back in the day. Small, feisty, twitchy. He reminded me a lot of Chris Carr's play. And it turns out it's very difficult to find Chris Carr tape still out in the ether. You type Chris Carr, like highlights or whatever, you need to specify the NFL player because apparently there's a basketball player named Chris Carr as well. And the only thing you find is him intercepting Ben Roethlisberger for the Raiders one time. But he struck me a lot like Chris Carr. Who else?
Yeah, Clark Phillips is one of the weirder prospects in this class. I'll just to add to that real quick. Because he's small and unathletic, right? Like small and below average athlete for your position it's a scary combo.
Right.
That I do think, like you said, he's probably going to have to be a slot at the next level. And I think he'll be damn good in that, but that's which taking things off a guy's plate, hard to put them back on. One I really liked in this draft class. I don't have any other good corner ones, but I'm going to go to linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
I like Jack Campbell, the Iowa linebacker, to Logan Wilson, the Wyoming linebacker. I think both are very steady. Like, both have few weaknesses to their game, and you look at their athletic profiles, and it's like there's nothing elite about them, shall we say. Like, they're not special athletes, but they aren't deficient in any way, shape, or form. And then that's how I feel about them on the football field. Solid tacklers, solid stack shed dudes, can play between the tackles till the cows come home. You may not be getting Bobby Wagner, but you're getting an above average starter for your football team at Mike linebacker. So I think that still has a good amount of value, and the security and safety is why, Campbell's LB2, top 50 player on the PFF board right now.
Yeah, I like that one. I like Jack Campbell a lot as well, actually. The last one I had was one we brought up yesterday. Joey Porter Jr. immediately reminded me a lot of J.C. Horn, and I think he's actually he struck me as more fluid, more dynamic than J.C. Horn was, which, to be fair, was something that I didn't like about J.C. Horn's tape, but that hasn't been a problem at the next level. So I may have just been too low on Horn's ability to do that kind of stuff at the time, but that struck me as that's immediately who he reminded me of. Apparently, it also is the same name Steve came up with watching his tape as well. What's your take on that one? I'm curious how you think we did.
Let me see who I comp Porter to. I didn't have a strong feel. I thought Horn was. Yeah, they both are like, you're watching their tape. Both are just pure bullies at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah,
and that's why it was almost hard to get a feel for J.C. Horn coming out, where it's just like, damn, he does nothing other than kill guys, and then it's over.
Right.
Like, I don't know how he turns. I don't know how, or like, just like watch his tape. I don't know how he is, how fluid he is, like down the football field. I don't know how he mirrors, because reps are over before they even get a chance to get to that point. So with Joey Porter, I feel similarly about some of his best reps. Like, that's his best reps are just, it's over at the line. I counted Carlton Davis.
Okay.
Who's similarly large, just like wins at the line press corner. But I see Horn as well, yeah.
So you got one more that I really like, actually. Michael Mayer, the tight end. Who did you comp him to?
Jason Witten. This might be my favorite comp of any. And now it's not like a pure, they didn't test out maybe as accurately as Julian Edelman and Jackson Smith and Jigba, but you watch them play and they run the same way. Jason Witten had the shuffle.
Yeah.
His feet didn't leave the ground when he ran. That's Michael Mayer. Like, he has the same shuffle. He has the same kind of subtle shoulder lean into a linebacker, and then just pushes off and he's gone. And there's like a yard of separation. That's all he needs, because he's going to haul it in. Like, they are very similar in those regards, and just skill set that you're getting at the next level.
I really like that one, actually, because I think it's true where for a long, long time, you watch Jason Witten tape and you're like, how does this keep working time after time after time? Like, there's nothing impressive about this. It's somehow just enough every single play, and then he's going to catch 57 out routes over the course of the season and add in like a smattering of the other occasional play here or there, and that's going to amount to 800 yards every year, and then he's just going to keep going until the end of time and become like one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history. And you're like, how do we get from one place to the other? I don't understand how we got here. That's kind of how I feel about Mayer, where I found myself very underwhelmed by his tape a lot, but it worked. Like it kept getting results, and you're like, as long as it keeps working, who cares? Right? But you end up, I think that's a great comp. You end up in this kind of Jason Witten world where it's so much less impressive than, a Travis Kelce or a Tony Gonzalez or whoever, like other elite tight end you want to pick out. But when it all stacks up at the end of it, he's in the same ballpark as those guys for production.
Yeah. And that's why I think fit for him is huge. Like, if you want to, like, I think he's awesome if you have two nice starting wide receivers already. You got two nice starting wide receivers that are vertical threats. He'll be awesome in your offense, in my opinion, because he's so good in the middle of the football field. But if you really want to make him like a focal point, like the way Kelce is used, like the way I think Dalton Kincaid could even be used at the next level, the way, Kyle Pitts or the high end tight ends, if you want him to be a first progression kind of guy, I just don't think that's ever going to be him. But if he's like like I said, if you already have two guys in place, like that takes your offense to a level that's damn near impossible to stop, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of your best comps. I like that one a lot. All right, that's going to do it for our show today. That's going to do it for the week of podcasts. Myself and Steve will be back on Monday when I think it's my turn to have a mock draft picked apart and laughed at by everybody. So we'll see you then. Thanks for showing up, Mike. Thanks for all your expertise as per usual. Draft expert Michael Renner. We'll talk to you on Monday.